Hello everyone. Good evening to all of you. I welcome all of you to this webinar on behalf of ELTAI. So before we begin the webinar, let's make a few announcements. I request the participants not to share their contact details such as email address and mobile number in the chat box. Kindly post your questions in the chat box using the Q&A option so that we will be able to answer all your questions at the end of the session. So before we begin, let us watch a promotional video about ELTAI. So once again, I welcome all of you to this webinar, our 99th webinar on language across the curriculum. We have Dr. Sankarakumar as the moderator. Dr. Sankarakumar is the Assistant Professor of English at PSG College of Technology, Coimbatore. He is also the Secretary of Coimbatore ELTAI Chapter. I welcome you, sir. I hand over the session to you.
Thank you so much, Xavier, sir. I, on behalf of English Language Teachers Association of India, in welcoming all the participants and the resource person for the webinar number 99 on language across the curriculum. And it's my great pleasure in introducing The resource person for today's webinar, Mr. Arindam Sengupta, who works as a teacher of English under West Bengal Sub-Educational Service, an active global professional member of TESOL International, USA, and English Language Teachers Association of India. He has been into the field of teacher training for the last 18 years, and he has conducted workshops for ESL teachers across the country. He was a recipient of the coveted scholarship for the Texas Intensive English Program at Austin, and also presented at the TESOL Convention 2015 in Canada. Arindam has worked with the British Council and the RELO American Center on various projects pertaining to material development and teacher empowerment to cater to the needs of second language learners of English in India. To note today's webinar on language across the curriculum, it's purely an attempt to develop language ability, not only through language classes by the language teacher, but in the context of other subjects by other teachers also. I'm definitely sure that you are going to really have a fruitful session on today's webinar. Arindam sir, the floor is now yours, please.
Thank you, Sankara. I hope I am clearly audible to everyone here. So good afternoon, good evening, participants. I must thank ELTAI and the entire team of ELTAI rather for inviting me to air a talk on today's topic. And ELTAI, the entire team, is doing wonderful work all throughout India, especially in arranging such wonderful webinars every Sunday afternoon. So it's a pleasure for me to be here as well. So I would be really sharing my views on today's session, which is language across curriculum. So we have very limited time, so without further ado, let me just get into the talk. So attempts to generate language skills in a student was primarily the basic purpose or the sole purpose of the language teacher, which was previously held. But now this approach, which is LAC or language across curriculum, it is the onus not only of the English language teacher to generate language skills in the students, but it is also the responsibility of teachers across the other subjects so that language skills get generated in the students naturally and effortlessly. So language across curriculum has to be initiated across each and every subject in school, in each and every academic activity, or not only academic activity, I also call mental activity, consciously or unconsciously. So today's talk, the key points of my presentation would be just to talk about what the approach actually entails in general, the background and the assumptions underlying this language across curriculum approach. And I would be just mentioning roughly the three main theories of language development, which has underpinnings behind this approach that we call language across curriculum, and its role in general and the benefits that it entails for both teachers and learners. So before I was starting to plan out this session, I was frantically searching through the internet for an appropriate quotation just to begin my talk. And this is one which really rules the internet, anything about language, which I found. And this is something really soul-stirring, which I thought it would go best with the subject of today's talk. What is language in general? So there are so many definitions about language. We can do this, we can do that. Everything is done through the medium of language. But something poetical would be best if we borrow Oliver Wendell Holmes's phrase, or his or her, what we can say, the quote. What is language? Language is the blood of the soul into which thoughts run and out of which they grow. So language is basically the primary method of communication. So whatever we do in our lives, it is through language. So if we look back on our own language development, when we were more or less 2 years old, we started to absorb the complicated language methods, the language process, without even knowing the grammar rules of L1. So our native language, we started to imbibe naturally. So regardless of how much we were being spoken to and how much we heard, we literally heard every word which was going on in the surroundings. So in that way, we started to speak. So language started to develop naturally. And it has been found by the researchers that before 2 years old, a child could even understand the difference between is running and will run. So even the tenses, so without knowing the tenses, the child is able to discriminate what is the difference. And when they often started to talk, there were certain instances when children have difficulties with the tenses and they make frequent errors, like the child says, I runned, or I saw two mans. But eventually they started to form and understand how the rules work, whether they work and whether they don't work. So language started to evolve. So the language development is not like walking up a ramp. It is like walking through the hills and valleys of a country road. So it's full of ups and downs. So we can never say that language development is linear. So how it is, everyone understands, everyone admits that language plays a central role in learning. So students assimilate new concepts. So whatever subject concepts teachers really do in schools and colleges, it is through language. So this is how students assimilate. And through speaking and writing, language is linked to the thinking process. So this is most important. That is, without language, we couldn't have even started to think and frame our concepts, our thoughts, our imaginings. And language also provides the discursive means and the structure for classroom interaction to occur. So whatever we are discussing in the class, the teacher talk, the student talk, the peer interaction, the teacher versus student interaction, everything has to form under the structure of language. So language is instrumental in the cognitive construction of knowledge and experience. So language has to be there for anything, any academic activity that we do and any academic activity that we pursue in schools. So, but we should always remember that language is more than communication skills. So if we basically say that the language is only communication, no. So language is more than that, because there are so many skills which are associated with language that it makes it much more a vaster field for us to really discover. Because language is more than the surface structure. So it's not that what we are simply saying, listening, or responding. It is much beyond that. So the entire school as an environment influences students' language development. So it is not only the language class that the students are generating or learning the language. It is in every class, in every physical, mental, any activity what the child is doing. So it is influencing his or her language development. So language plays a very primary, a very important key role in virtually all school learning. So all school activities, whatever the teacher is pursuing in the class, everything is through language. So this slide, I just want to express this fact that language, how does language grow? So it is basically, it is very natural, it is very spontaneous. Language grows, or language comes in us just like the leaves come on a tree. So they just start to sprout in each one of us. So there's no formula that we can really come up to a consensus that this is the method of language development or this is the method of language generation. So it takes place, it grows, it takes time for this to develop, but it is a very natural, instinctive process. And language is so very important because it is the window to the world. So without language, we can hardly do anything. The gateway of opportunities, the ocean of opportunities that lie in the world around and the world beyond is through language. And without English language, we cannot even take a single step in today's world. So we all know that without a primary language, which is now English, because the mother tongue is only centered in our states or in our region. So English has to develop within us it is necessary for opening the doors and windows of our mind. And in today's world of constantly evolving globalization and the internet, so we find that English language has started to make its presence felt more in today's world of expanding internet, expanding business communication, everything, even collaboration between countries, between governments, between states, everything is facilitated through the use of language. Now, language across curriculum, as I said, it is an approach, because developing language skills or the ability that a child can navigate through language classes, it has to be done through other subjects as well. So language education does not take place only in specific subjects reserved for it, but it is generated through every activity, every subject which the teacher does in school. So this linguistic dimension in each and every learning activity is sometimes hidden, and it is partly implicit and therefore often underestimated in its importance. So that is why the importance of discussing language across the curriculum has evolved in today's world. So subject teachers, they need to be competent enough to teach both content and language. So children can manage to negotiate a new language only when the teacher does or uses the language in class, and he provides the all necessary opportunity to hear and express themselves. So the students need to get more opportunities to express themselves in the English language in class, so that they can start becoming verbally competent enough to really face the world later. So the basic aims of language across curriculum is three. So first is to empower people with knowledge and skills that will enable them to participate effectively in global activities. Then it also attempts to develop a language or communicating ability that crossed across all subjects, and to enhance content competencies rather, and language competencies simultaneously. So we have to do all these together, which language across curriculum can best negotiate. So the goals of language across curriculum as an approach or as a process is to support the language development, which I have already reiterated, that is in each and every child in all the domains of language use in each learning activity in the school, and also in turn to give children feedback about their progress through appropriate assessment and evaluation. So this needs to be a continuous process through which the child gets the feedback about how much he is going, what is his basic way of progress. So language across curriculum proponents, they encourage children to speak, to discuss, to express their opinions, and to solve problems together. So it has to be very much interactive. So language across curriculum supports the language development in every learning activity in schools. Now, both interaction and language acquisition theories. So if we look at the linguistics behind this approach, so we will see that all the interaction and language acquisition theories that are there, which are all so much in vogue, they all emphasize the importance of language competence in classroom communication or interaction. So this is the crux of the theory which we are now discussing. That is, even the two theories, that is the interaction theory and the language acquisition theory, they both assume that if a person has acquired sufficient competence in the language being learned, it is likely that he or she can understand what is being said to him. So these theories, they literally put certain basic premises which we need to know. That is, what is the background? Why do these proponents have come up with such a procedure, such an approach? So the first approach that we need to know is about Vygotsky's social cultural theory, where he explains how language is used by teachers to mediate learning. So at the center of Vygotsky's theory is mediation of language, which we all know is input. And Vygotsky in his theory clarifies how language input is processed through social interaction between teachers and learners, and between learners themselves. So we know there are two kinds of interaction in the class to produce meaningful outputs. So the basic goal is a meaningful output in the classroom. And Vygotsky in his theory also highlights the role of the different participants in the classroom, that is the teacher and the learners in the classroom interaction. And he also stresses on the fact that children have to learn to use language for a range of purposes and in a range of cultural and situational contexts. So it is not only in the subject, language, or literature that the child will be able to do this. It has to be across all academic cognitive activity in the classroom, across all subjects. We also have his concept of the ZPD, which Vygotsky is so very famous for, that is the zone of proximal development. So we know that what it is. So it is basically the difference between the learner's current level of development without any assistance and the potential level that learners can reach with a certain degree of assistance by the teacher is what the ZPD is. So we need to take students toward this zone of proximal development, and that is only possible through a lot of scaffolding. So scaffolding is nothing but support. So the student needs a lot of language support inbuilt in the classroom interactive structure, whatever the teacher is teaching, because classroom interactions are a major site for language development. So the teacher has to give more and more support to the student in the classroom in whatever activity he or she is pursuing. Next, we have the interactionist theory, which is very much aligned to Vygotsky's theory as well. So the interactionist theory propounders, they suggest that learning occurs as a result of interaction between the linguistic environment and the learner's internal or innate environment. So it is something to do with genetics as well as the environment. So both the factors are coming to play here. And they also talk about the language acquisition device, which is the LAD. That is a kind of inbuilt language ability that each one of us has. Even Chomsky had discussed about it. So the interactionist theory proposes that learning is essentially a social rather than an individual endeavor. So we need to interact, we need to get together, we need to form groups, we need to exchange our information. So meanings are constructed between rather than within individuals and are shaped by the social activity. So the interactionist theory propounders also, they talk about the interaction and the collaborative nature of the interaction which is required to be done in the classroom for proper generation of language among students. Next, we have Krashen's monitor model, which is so very famous and so much, it is so very relevant in our context. So according to Krashen, again, language is acquired and learned, and language acquisition occurs subconsciously through natural communication. So it's like the leaves coming to the tree. It is subconscious acquisition, and when the students have exposure to the target language. So both acquisition and learning involve interaction between two or more individuals, and Krashen stresses that in this process of acquisition, the learner must interact with the natural environment. So it is the family, the parents, the friends, everyone around us who has a role to play in our language development. So that is why the environment is so very important, where the child grows up, where the child mixes, and what the child gets to hear and listen throughout his career. Here I also wish to mention Jim Cummings' interdependence hypothesis, which is at a cognitive level. Cummings says that languages are not separate, but they are connected with each other by means of a common underlying proficiency. Because here we often get to hear about proponents, they keep on saying that our mother tongue is more important. Even UNESCO stresses the fact that, yes, it is the native tongue which needs to be first addressed. Even primary school children should be getting more and more exposure to the native tongue. So even Cummings proposes his interdependence hypothesis, where he says that easily if the child is very much fluent in his native tongue, so the skills which he has learned in L1 will definitely swimmingly go into L2. So although the surface aspects, he says, that is the pronunciation, the fluency, etc., of different languages can be distinguished, there is an underlying cognitive academic proficiency that is common across languages. So if the child is good in his L1, definitely those skills are going to be transferred in his English language proficiency, or L2, that is what we normally call in the Indian subcontext. So literacy skills being developed in one language strongly predict corresponding skills in another language acquired later in time. So all these theories, I found that they have a strong underpinning behind language across the curriculum. So all these are debatable. It is up to us as teachers whether we go with all these theories or not. But basically what we find in our scenario, that is, our classrooms are all multilingual ecosystems. There are so many languages going on in the classroom. There are so many speakers of different languages in the class. And as the language teacher, it is a huge responsibility, and it's a huge challenge rather, to really address all these children together in a single language and make our learning go over to them. So, but the basic fact in India, or in the Indian subcontext, what we get to see is teachers and students, they communicate better in their mother tongues than in English. So not only the students don't have English proficiency, we also come across teachers who are language teachers, but they don't have the necessary fluency and the accuracy in English so as to give the students in his class better kind of an exposure. So for teachers to be able to teach English effectively in language across the curriculum, they must be confident and proficient enough in the use of the language themselves. Now, the main questions to ponder as teachers or teacher trainers in India and elsewhere, where English is our second language or even the third language, is all what Brian Fillion in his study on language across the curriculum has proposed. So these questions are very pertinent. So I found that these are very much relevant to our context as teachers and trainers and practitioners. So how many teachers encourage students exploratory talk, so that they can come across new ideas, information into students' own language? I don't get. It is seriously lacking. And in an average day or a week in the school, how much opportunity does an average student have to question, talk, or write about the things he or she is expected to learn? How readable and interesting are the textbooks? Are they communicative? Are they in a sort of conversation mode that the students and the teachers get into interaction? No. So what additional material is available for students so that they can read about the subject, so that they can get more information, more opportunities to delve deep into them? How much writing do the students do in the school? What kinds of writing and in what subjects? So how often do they discuss the question that they have to read or they're going to write? So these are the things that we teachers, if we find answers, if we ask each one another, we can definitely know that all our answers are going to be the same. So these answers are definitely going to be the answer for why language across curriculum should be the most preferable choice of method that we should adopt in our classes. So teacher talk takes center stage in the classroom according to all the theories that I just proposed here, and which are the basic bedrocks for language across curriculum. So teachers' language is very vital in creating the condition for meaningful learning, formation and development of concepts, oral discussions, creating a rich experiential context to arouse interest, and immerse the pupils in the content topic using multimodalities. So nowadays we find that teachers use a lot of things to make the classrooms much more interesting to the students. They use videos, they use audios, they use podcasts, but at the end or at the beginning of everything is teacher talk. So that needs to be done. But is the teacher conversant enough in the language to give this talk to his students? Are the students going to get a lot of listening exposure? So these are the things which are to be remembered and taken note of. So does learning occur effectively if learners do not understand the language used in teaching? And is teaching effective if teachers cannot express themselves well in the language of teaching? So both of these questions are reciprocal. So we need to address both these issues together if we are to find that, okay, what is the best way out, what we can do as teachers in today's context where our students lack severely in English skills. The new education policy of 2020 also has a few suggestions which will definitely help this approach to get into our system. That is, they also propound that pedagogy must be evolved to make education more holistic, more integrated, enjoyable, engaging. So teaching and learning is to be conducted in a more interactive manner. So that is more, again, giving more space to interaction or giving more importance to that. So we need to develop 21st century capabilities across a range of disciplines. And we all know what 21st century skills are. They cannot be hammered into the students. They need to be involved with them. Then only it can come into them. Then only it can grow in them naturally and subconsciously. So the new education policy also talks about promotion of soft skills, which are communication, discussion, debate. So again, going back to the interactionist theory, experiential learning, constructivism. So all the things are tied together in language across curriculum. And they also speak of a 4-year integrated B.Ed course by 2030, so that teachers will become, it will be the minimal degree of qualification. And language across curriculum is a very important topic for the B.Ed students. So now we come to the question, why is so much hype and hoopla about the English language? I always stress on Timothy J. Crace's quote that English is important because it is not only important in getting a better job, it is everywhere in social interaction. And if you can't speak it, then you are a nobody. So if you can't speak English, you are dumb. You are nowhere to get a position in the world. So you can hardly achieve anything in life without the English language. And we know the present scenario of English is very bleak. So is our English good enough? This is what we need to always address as teachers and learners and practitioners. And we can definitely see that the unemployment graph is rising day by day upwards. So how do we address these challenges? So we have to accept that is English language has to be really hammered, has to be really grown into the students so that they can become well armed with the language skills in order to sell themselves in the world. Otherwise, they are not going to get any job, neither can they fulfill their life's aspirations or anything. So what's the problem that is confronting our curriculum, our method of teaching, our schools, colleges? What is the problem? It is that language learning is not like learning other subjects of geography, history, or science. So what teachers fail to understand is that even language teachers fail to understand that the pupils may understand the language system. They may get 100 out of 100 in a grammar test, but they don't have the basic use of language. They don't know the basics of language and what they can communicate. So that is more important as teachers, what we need to do, what are the changes we need to bring in the context of our teaching and learning. So language across curriculum as a concept is that is all language aspects should be given due attention by teachers across different subject areas. So even the science teacher has to be well versed with all the language features that he or she needs to hammer into the students. So language education, it does not take place only in the English language, but it occurs throughout the whole curriculum. So it is everyone's concern. So whether the pupils are learning mathematics, geography, science, LSRW, listening, speaking, reading, writing, they are indispensable tools for the learning process. And here we have what we call the register of a text. We all know that the school-related registers, they tend to involve more written-like discourse. So what do I mean by that? So the academic registers that students are forced to read in schools and colleges, the books are less personal, the language is more abstract, more lexically dense, more structured than face-to-face everyday language which students confront in their day-to-day life, with which they are familiar. So they have to form a bridge between the two aspects of language, what they do in real life and what they are confronting when they are pursuing academic activities. So the school language is allowing very little interactive or personal involvement in the studies. So it is the teacher's role who has to fill in this gap or build the bridge in order to bridge this existing gap between the difference in the language registers. So the development of literacy within any subject in school curriculum involves learning the technical language, the grammatical patterns, and generic structures which are particular to the subject. So the language used in science is different to the language used in chemistry, to the language used in biology or history, geography. So all have got specific content obligatory words which are specific to that particular language. So the technical vocabulary is different than the general language. So language across curriculum, it helps bridge what I talked about, this linguistic and learning gaps which exist in our day-to-day transactions in classes. So normal teaching, it is only giving more importance on language, but the project teaching is concentrating on both language and content, but language across curriculum, it gives, or it makes the whole process of language teaching become more procedural. So it becomes a process kind of a thing where language becomes just a tool. So the students learn through each and every activity, they get immersed into the language, and the teachers, they start doing all activities using the language, and thereby the students are getting well armed with all the things and all the nuances that they are to learn in the school. So in this context, we also get to use CLIL, or what we call is the content and language integrated learning, which argues an across the curriculum approach that breaks down barriers between English and other subjects. So now CLIL is very much used abroad. So there are many textbooks written using the CLIL methodology. So language learning, when supplemented with content, it enriches the scope of second language learning, and learners are exposed to a considerable amount of language through stimulating content. So it is not only that is through literature or through poetry or through a short story that the child will learn English, but it is through across all subject topics, all areas, which we can bring into CLIL, or content integrated language learning. So basically there are 8 modes of human activities which involve language. So all these 8 modes needs to be developed, needs to be utilized by the teacher. So it has to be listening, speaking, reading, writing, viewing, shaping, matching, and moving in across all subjects, all domains, all activities which the teachers are to do in the classes. So all human activities must be taking forth, it should be transferred into the classroom itself. Here I also wish to mention about Cummings's concept of BICS and CALP. So he distinguishes the important roles that students have to use. The 2 important languages the students need to learn is, the first is BICS, which is basic interpersonal communication skills, which refers to the everyday language which we need to interact socially. And here the abilities of interpretation, expression, negotiation are essential. And the other language skill is the cognitive academic language proficiency, which is CALP. So this type of language is essential for students to succeed in school. So it includes the LSRW skills. So there should be the development of both BICS and CALP in the academic setting that teachers have to utilize. So what is the common thread between BICS and CALP? Both BICS and CALP is dependent on the quality of adult child or teacher-student interactions. So the more the teacher is conversant with the language, the more the teacher utilizes the exchange of language in the class, more BICS is going to develop, as well as CALP. So we first develop BICS in our local familiar languages, and then we later start to communicate with CALP. So first BICS starts to develop, and then CALP comes in, but both in our first languages, and then L2, L3, whatever languages we learn. So CALP in L1 can support in the learning of CALP in L2 and vice versa. Again, the interdependence hypothesis, which Cummings states so profoundly, and that really works. So classroom has to be utilized as a space for discourse, and the teachers should understand the importance of classroom interaction. So that is what is most important, that is teacher to student and student versus student talk, which is so very important. So what are the different classroom discourse types that all teachers across all subjects they can utilize in the classroom? Well, there are various techniques which we teachers know. There's questioning, explaining, illustrating, and we also have the KWL or the TWL. KWL and TWL are nothing but just before the start of a class, a teacher can tell the students to write what he knew or what he knows and what he wants to know and what he has learned after the class, or what he thinks. T can also refer to the thing. So what the student thinks before a subject or before a topic is being taught in the class, and what he wants to know and what he has learned. Students can also be asked to write their journal at the end of any subject teaching is done. Then the teacher can also create a lot of parallel tasks through repetition, variation, and reinforcement. Language can be hammered. So the necessity of pair work, group work, teacher-directed whole class work, which we can all use Bloom's taxonomy and all the different stages that Bloom has outlined going up on the pyramid, which we can all utilize as different subject teachers in the classroom in order to make our students verbally competent in English. So classroom interaction needs to be understood and optimized. So we need, as teachers, we need to always have the answers to these questions before we plan any academic activity, before we do any lesson planning. So who gets to speak? So the participants' turn distribution is important. What do they talk about? So we need to be very much zeroing in on the topic that we have for discussion or presentation. And what does each participant do with the various opportunities that they're getting to speak? And what sort of an atmosphere is created as a result? And what accent and dialect is being used? So the code is also important. So teachers, basically, they need to skillfully interweave language aspects in the topic that he is doing, in the content that he is using in the classroom. And he has to build in language support via classroom talk. So a lot of scaffolding is required. A lot of support needs to be given to the student in various ways possible, so that the student can gradually expand his repertoire of L2 resources in a safe, affirming, participatory, and non-threatening environment. So again, the effective skills has to be kept in mind. So teachers have to always remember that they need to recognize and reinforce the central role of language in the learning process. So here I have this image of Dr. Rose's orbital structure of a learning task, which I found it very easy for teachers of India to adopt, which is much less complex. So at the center of any activity is the task which the teacher plans to do in the class, and he has to set the focus, what the child or what the students has to do. And then he has also to frame in mind how to evaluate the task. So these three aspects, what Dr. Rose talks about, the focus, task, and evaluate, is the nucleus of his orbital structure of a learning task. And the starting and the ending phases are the prepare and the elaborate. So prepare is what we do in order to prepare the students for the activity that we are doing. So we brainstorm or we use different multimodalities in the classroom. So we need to make the child get into the topic. So we need to make him interested. So there might be so many different programs that we can take. We can start to make the class become very much warming up sessions, warming up activities that we do for the prepare stage. And then we take into new context. So whatever has been learned, we take it onward towards various other activities, which we do in the elaborate phase. So Dr. Rose's orbital structure of a learning task can easily be adopted by all subject teachers across the curriculum, which would definitely be helpful to make language across curriculum come into effect. But in our context, it is very sorry that we are very much, it is very woeful to state that it is hardly practiced, though it is very much in the process of linguistics or in the B.Ed course, but we find that teachers hardly practice language across curriculum as an approach, because it is the inability is ours for the teacher, which we cannot break out of the rigid boundaries that we have framed in our minds, because we believe that language is to be acquired only by reading books, and content, only the content is important. So mastering the target language is not so much important. And we also face the frequent resistance of many subject teachers. No, I'll not be able to speak in English. I'll not be able to interact in English. I'm not going to do other kinds of activities in the class, because teachers themselves have a very poor grasp of English. So just to draw my talk to a conclusion, I just want to again reiterate on the benefits that language across curriculum has for the learners as well as the teachers. For the learners, again, just to reiterate the same points which I have already mentioned, because that language across curriculum, it improves communication skills in a foreign language. It really gives the students more chances, opportunities to learn the content, more to expand their ideas, to discuss different issues in a foreign language, to collect different technical terms related to different subjects. So many things across science, across social science, they come into language, they come into our everyday discourse. So that is again important when language across curriculum is practiced. So it opens a vast career world. The students become much more conversant, much more armed with the English language repertoire, the skills, the vocabulary, the way to negotiate and interact with the outside world. So it helps students getting admitted to foreign universities, and it facilitates effective self-study and referring. And for teachers, I think it is always an onward journey for teachers in order to make us grow better day by day. So teachers can also improve their skills in a foreign language, because ultimately English is a foreign language that we are teaching as L2 or L3 in our setting. And it also helps teachers to teach the content, different contents in a foreign language. And it helps teachers to update their knowledge. It helps teachers to give clear instructions to students in foreign languages. And it also helps the teacher manage group activities effectively. So I've found that even teachers opined that language across curriculum approach has really benefited them even in many ways in classroom management. So to conclude, language across curriculum creates greater linguistic proficiency. It increases motivation among students and teachers, so they get interested in the task they're doing. They love to come to school, they love to learn, they love to interact, they love to get into the process of language teaching and learning. And language across curriculum is appropriate for learners of all abilities, and it leads to greater cultural awareness. So I think I have been able to do justice in a small nutshell of, because it's a huge constellation of things that we need to talk about, and within a single expanse of a webinar, it is really very difficult to encapsulate everything. There are so many questions which I can see coming up. It is very normal, but this is what all I have to present in today's topic, language across curriculum. So I thank the entire team of ELTAI for letting me have this space today on Sunday afternoon to really air my suggestions, my views, my take on language across curriculum as a trainer. Thank you, everyone.
Shankar sir, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you, Arindam sir, for making this event really an eye-opener based on language across curriculum. And of course, language, as you have pointed out, language is the blood of the soul into which thoughts run and out of which they grow, as Oliver Holmes pointed out. So your talk entirely focuses on language plays a very central role on learning and improving the cognitive abilities and increasing language acquisition, etc. So thank you very much, sir, Arindam sir, for bringing a limelight to this topic. And we have a number of questions based on this topic. And first of all, there is a question from Ms. Lakshmi. Is there really a strong connection between cognitive abilities, language acquisition, and social development? Is there any theory to justify this?
Yes, I think there are many theories really to justify whatever we are, whatever the questions and so many things which are there's an interplay between all the theories. Yes, definitely there is a connection between cognitive abilities and language acquisition. So you can just see that I mentioned only 3 theories here, but it is all dependent on how much we think that these are applicable in the context that we are teaching when we are going to play the role of a language teacher in our classrooms. So theory doesn't come into place when we are doing in practice what we are doing. So the classroom itself is a very difficult place. When we are going to the class, none of the theories work. So teachers forget what the theory propounds or what the linguists say about all their approaches. So when we go to the class, it has to be an amalgamation of all the theories, the interactionist theory, the constructivist theory, the nativist theory. So there are so many theories. They all definitely say that there is a role between the cognitive skills and the language acquisition. But it is what I say, there's always an interplay. So definitely, I would say the language acquisition is more important, and we teachers need to give more opportunities how this can be done through a more playful, more interactive way, and in a more natural way. That is what is more important.
Okay, well, thank you, sir. There is another question from Dr. P.N. Ramani. Could you suggest 2 or 3 essential or basic or preconditions for making language learning and teaching across the curriculum happen very effectively?
Yeah, so this is very important a question. That is, I also tell whenever I go to workshops, there are so many subject teachers which come to attend the workshop. So it is not normally what happens that we suggest some basic activities to our teachers, but all the activities, they cannot be done across all subjects. So the most important precondition that I think that language learning and teaching across the curriculum will happen only if the teacher has to understand that he has to initiate a lot of classroom talk. So whatever be the topic, even if it is a dry subject as a mathematics, that is, teachers are asking the student to do some writing in solving a problem, or simply doing a theory in physics. So it can be like what I was reading in a textbook, a very good example, that is the electric charge in a physics chapter. So the teacher initiates a talk about what does charging mean. So he brings in the real life example that what students mean by charging. So we charge our credit cards, we recharge our debit cards or our mobile phones. So he initiates a talk about what this word charging refers to in real life. And then he goes to electric charge in physics. So what he does is he initiates a lot of classroom discussion. So what happens here, this is not very important to what the physics teacher is teaching in the class, but he is giving a lot of language exposure, which the child is using language in real life. So what is happening, the child is becoming verbally fluent. So the teacher has to really frame these kinds of ideas. He should be well versed in really coming up with stories, coming up with anecdotes, so that the classroom environment is enthused, the students become interested. There's a lot of talk which has to be generated. So one precondition is this. The other is the students should know that it is not only that the teacher speaks in the class, but it is also that they have a role to play. They have much space for classroom discourse. So on any activity, the teacher is to constantly question, the teacher is to constantly give the child more activities and tasks, little tasks, so the teacher can simply ask them a lot of things outside the curriculum. So this is another precondition, and the teacher has to make more and more use of English in the class. So even when we use a lot of native language, because our students are not so conversant in English, so it doesn't matter, because again, if we go with Cummings's interdependence theory, we can definitely allow the intertransference of language skills. It is not a deterrent in that sense, but teachers should be well open to all these sorts of activities, that is more and more scaffolding. He should be ready to give more and more diverse ways of support to the student so that he becomes verbally more fluent and accurate in the language.
Thank you very much, sir, for the fabulous explanation you have thrown. And there is another question from Izas. How does this new education policy contribute to the development of language teaching?
Yes, new education policy stresses more importance on English for specific purposes, ESP, or rather than English for general, like for communication and soft skills, 21st century skills, because ultimately at the end, what we know is that the student has to get a job. Even after passing out with 100 out of 100 in English or 100 out of 100 in academic content or academic subjects, the student is unable to get a job because he is unable to face the interview board, where he gets totally unnerved in order to express. So our students know a lot of theory, they know the subject, but they don't have the necessary skills to sell themselves. So the new education policy, I really applaud the proponents of the new education policy, because they have dawned up to this idea of employability skills. That is why the more stress is on this. So language across curriculum as an approach will definitely help the new education policy theorists to, we teachers can really take them or make them a reality if we really follow the things outlined in this approach, or CLIL, or content integrated learning, whatever. So all the things we need to do together as teachers in order to make our students interact and come up with their own ideas, so that they become more verbally fluent and confident about their own language skills.
Okay, thank you, sir. And there is another question from, there is one more question from Dr. Seema Singh. Language across curriculum ought to be given more importance, considering we are increasingly realizing the importance of multidisciplinary approaches in education and research. It helps to bring the various realms of learning together and discarding their divisions into strict watertight compartments. Yet,
Right.
why are subject teachers resistant to embracing language learning in the right spirit? And how can they be sensitized in this regard?
Yes, so this is again, Seema, you are really hitting the nail on the head. That is, it is the teachers who are creating the problem, if I am to say it very commonly. That is, teachers themselves, as I said, the way we have grown up as students, with the way we have learned the language, maybe there are many things that we cannot start to bring in the change. So teachers across subjects, they need to have this method grown in them. So they need to understand the basic tenets of the approach. They need to be confident themselves of their own language. As I said, that is, we constantly start to criticize the students' verbal skills, the students' writing skills. But the same question which Brian Fillion in his study says, that are the students getting the right amount of exposure? Are the students getting enough support? So it is basically, which is boiling down to the teacher's role and the way the textbooks are written and devised in our state or in our country. So we need to frame the appropriate lesson structure where there is an amalgamation of different tasks and activities, where all the teachers feel themselves that, okay, it is very easy. It is nothing very difficult, or it's nothing extraordinary that I need to do in the class. So it is what exactly I'm doing, only interspersed with a lot of different activities where there is an interplay of language and content. So this basically needs to dawn on the teachers. So the teachers need more sensitization workshops. The teacher needs more trainings, and they need a lot of support. Even teachers need a lot of support. So like the body of teachers that we have in ELTAI, or there needs to be a good network among the teachers in the school, among the teachers in the educational fraternity, where they can come forward in helping each other, because nowadays there's so much of communication amongst ourselves over social media, so we can do a lot together. So it all depends, that is, the teacher has to awaken to this need of what this theory propounds, and what are the little changes that we can bring in for a greater effect in our language classes. or in whatever classes we go to teach.
Okay, fabulous, sir. And thank you so much for especially training teachers in some context. And it is now time to propose the word of thanks to the resource person. I, on behalf of English Language Teachers Association of India, thank Professor Arindam Sengupta for having accepted an invitation to be the resource person for this webinar number 19 on language across the curriculum. And thank you so much for your experiences into this issue. And the role of new education. And I thank the host for hosting the session, and I thank wholeheartedly all the people for having taken an important step of learning, especially in the field of English language teaching, and as teachers, appropriate time to endorse the influence of language across curriculum, the teachers of other languages. And thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Once again, I thank the moderator and the speaker on behalf of ELTAI. Dear participants, I have a few announcements. The first announcement is about the certificates. Many of you have inquired about certificates in the chat box. We issue certificates only to ELTAI members, students, and international participants who attend the entire live session. So a link to the feedback form will be sent by email to all those who attended the session around 6 p.m. today. Kindly fill out the feedback form before 10 p.m. tonight to receive certificates of participation. It takes at least 10 days to generate the certificate and send it to you by email. So kindly bear with us. We'll try to send the certificates as soon as possible. In case you have already attended the previous sessions, and if you have not received the certificates, you can always download the certificates of previous sessions at the link that I've shared in the chat box. I'll share it once again. And if you are not a member of ELTAI, please join the association by filling out the membership form, which is available at our website. I'll share the website URL in the chat box once again. Your membership will help us to conduct many more teacher development programs like this. And we always want to keep these programs as far as possible. We want to keep them as free of cost. And if you haven't received certificates for any of the previous 10 webinars you have attended, please write to info@eltai.in. While writing a mail, please mention the webinar number, your complete name, and your membership number. We'll verify your attendance and will issue a certificate. And I thank all of you for joining us today at this webinar, Language Across the Curriculum, and attending the session. My second announcement is about the next webinar. Our next webinar is going to be our 100th webinar. We are going to complete 100 webinars by next week. The next week's webinar will be on creative writers, creative processes, a conversation. We'll have three authors, Ms. Anuradha Mawa, Ms. Mariam Karim Awad, and Mr. Sujit Prasad. And the session will be moderated by Dr. Shravan Kumar. I welcome all of you to participate in the next webinar as well. And in the next webinar, we'll make a few announcements about ELTAI webinars in the future. We are going to have some changes from June onwards. And we'll also announce about our upcoming annual conference in the next webinar. Till then, thank you, everyone. We'll meet you once again in the next webinar. Thank you, all of you.